This video is about the process of compiling a project budget. A project budget is also referred to as a project cost management plan. Therefore, this video is about project budgeting. And again, project budgeting is also referred to as project cost management planning. According to the Project Management Institute, PMI for short, the PMI's seminal document or seminal project management standard that is universally acclaimed is called the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK for short. Therefore, according to the PMI's PMBOK, project budgeting is the process of aggregating the estimated costs of individual activities or work packages to establish an authorized cost baseline. The key benefit of this process is that it determines the cost baseline against which project performance can be monitored and controlled. Work packages are the lowest level instances of the work breakdown structure. We have covered the work packages extensively in our video on the work breakdown structure, or WBS for short. The video on WBS can be accessed and viewed from this Real Institute channel. Whereas the individual project activities are the detailed constituents of the project schedule. We have covered the project activities and the project schedule extensively in our video on the project schedule or on the project time management plan. The video on project schedule can be accessed and viewed from this Real Institute channel. On the other hand, baseline is an approved plan or an authorized plan. Again, we have covered and addressed the project plan baseline concept in a video on the project schedule or project schedule development. Again, the video on project schedule development and the project plan baseline concept can be accessed and viewed from this Real Institute channel. Basically, cost management planning or project cost management planning or project budgeting produces a document or an artifact that is called a project cost management plan or a project budget. According to the PMI's PMBOK, project budget includes all the funds authorized to execute the project. The cost baseline is the approved version of the time-phased project budget that includes contingency reserves but excludes management reserves. Project budgeting is an aspect of project planning. An aspect of project planning that deals specifically with the costs or the expenses that are incurred when undertaking a project. Cost estimation, cost allocation, cost aggregation, allowances determination, and budget consolidation are the main tasks that are involved in the compilation of the project budget or in the development of the project cost management plan. Project cost management planning, also referred to as project budgeting, is a process that falls under the project management planning function and the project cost critical success factor or knowledge area. It is a process of determining project budget or a process of developing a project cost management plan. In this video, we will cut to the chase. We will not address the generic aspects of project management plan development. We have covered a lot of important and generic characteristics of project planning in some of our videos on this Real Institute channel. In the videos on the development of the project scope statement, on the development of the work breakdown structure, on the development of the project schedule, on the determination of the project critical path, just to mention a few. In these videos, we have dealt in detail about the ins and outs of project planning. Also, in our videos on the project management functions and the project management critical success factors, we have been extensive. All the said videos can be accessed and viewed from this Real Institute channel. In this video, we will just cut to the chase. We'll go straight to the steps and examples of project budgeting and developing the project cost management plan. The development of the project cost management plan or project budget is a 5-step process. The first step is cost determination, also referred to as cost estimation. The second step is cost allocation. The third step is cost aggregation. The fourth step is allowances determination or reserves determination. And the fifth step is budget consolidation. Therefore, project cost management planning or project budgeting is the process of determining or estimating the cost of individual project activities, allocating the determined or estimated cost to individual project activities, aggregating all costs that are allocated to individual project activities into direct consumables costs, also into direct labor or human resource costs, and also into indirect or overhead cost aggregates, then further aggregated into project phase aggregates, and lastly aggregated into project aggregate. The project cost management planning process is carried further by determining the project allowances or project reserves, such as the contingency reserve and management reserve, and then finally consolidating the project aggregate and the project reserves into a project budget or into a project price. In cases where a project is undertaken for profit, the profit margin is determined from the project aggregate and the project reserves consolidation, or is slotted into the process after the project aggregate and the project reserves, so as to then arrive at the final project budget or into a final project price. This is a project budget or a project price that, upon approval or authorization by the project steering committee or by the project sponsor or by the project owner, becomes the project cost baseline or the project cost management plan baseline or the project budget baseline. Project budgeting begins with the costing of all the individual project activities, while project budgeting, and specifically the costing of project activities, is preceded by having a project schedule in place. It is in the process of developing a project schedule where project activities are determined. It is therefore not possible to compile a project budget without a project schedule. The project schedule should have been developed first before a project budget can be developed. As already indicated, we do have a video on the development of the project schedule on this Real Institute channel. This video can be accessed and viewed if we are not yet familiar with the development of the project schedule, because it may not be easy to appreciate project budgeting without the understanding of project scheduling. As it's been the case for the other videos that deal with project planning on this Real Institute channel, we will use as a case example a project that is undertaken to build a custom steel sliding gate for a customer. It is a project that is undertaken by Steelworks Manufacturing. The project schedule for this case project is as demonstrated. As you can see, if you understand the project schedule concept, that this project has a total of 24 activities, including the events. And these 24 activities are grouped into 5 project phases or 5 project milestones. The phases of this project are design, purchase, build, finish, and install. And each phase has its own activities that have cost or expense implications in this project. Well, when it comes to project budgeting, the purchases phase becomes an exception in that it doesn't have cost or expense implications. If it has, these are minimal and they are overheads or indirect costs that are incurred in other project phases. Project costing or project budgeting or project cost management plan development starts by allocating costs for all the individual activities of the project effort that are stated in the project schedule. Most activities have costs that can be categorized into 3 aspects. For most activities, there is first cost for materials or consumables, such as the bricks, sand, concrete mix, the cement, the plumbing pipes, the electrical wires, timber trusses, the roof tiles, paint, etc. for a house building project. Then second, there are costs for capital resources or for equipment and tools such as digging picks, compactors, mortar mixing shovels, spirit level, bricklaying trowels, cutting grinder, painting brushes, etc. And then third, there are costs for labor or for human resources, such as bricklayers, structural engineers, electricians, painters, plumbers, etc. Project costing is primarily about estimating or allocating costs for these resources for each project activity. It is about determining or estimating costs for materials, resources, or consumable resources. It is about determining or estimating costs for capital resources. And it is about determining or estimating costs for human resources that are necessary for the execution of the project activities. The costs for individual project activities are determined or estimated by using what I would say is common sense. Common sense means that as a project manager, you simply source quotations or price lists from suppliers, from the suppliers of the required materials or of the required consumable resources. The same can be said of the cost of the required tools or equipment or capital resources if these are to be hired or leased from external suppliers. In cases where the required tools or equipment for your project are sourced from within your organization, the cost for their usage could be determined by their depreciation costs in proportion to their usage by your project. Or the cost for their usage could be determined by pricing from their respective cost centers or profit centers from within your organization. Common sense also means that as a project manager, you simply source quotations for service fees or for professional service fees from labor brokers or labor agents, from the labor agents of the required laborers or of the required professionals or of the required artisans or technicians or of the required human resources for your project. Alternatively, as a project manager, you can access and use the industry standards, the industry standard rates or remuneration figures for the required human resources in your project. Examples could be, say, a daily rate for a bricklayer who builds using stock bricks or cement bricks, or a daily rate for a phase brick bricklayer, or an hourly rate for a structural engineer. In cases where the required human resources for your project are sourced from within your organization, even if it is through seconding from various functional units within your organization, you can utilize the exact salaries or the hourly or daily remuneration rates of such human resources to determine the cost for your project activities. Of course, factoring the amounts of time that individual human resources will spend performing the activities of your project. Common sense could also mean that as a project manager, you use experience, or what the PMI's PMBOK refers to as expert judgment. That is, you apply your expert judgment. You can also access the documents or the records of previous or similar projects within your organization. Of course, in such cases, you will have to factor in inflation for your project costs. Bottom line is that every aspect of a project activity has to be costed so as to arrive at a true price for the project, or so as to arrive at the true cost for the project. In our case example, the project manager will list all the required material resources, capital resources, and human resources for each project activity in the project schedule. The required resources will be listed in terms of the required types and quantities, or complements in terms of the human resources. Then the project manager will determine or estimate the cost for each resource by way of common sense options that have just been stated. For example, for the project activity measure gate site, the required resources are transport to the customer site or gate site, the tape measure to be used in measuring the opening where the gate is to be installed, and the structural engineer who will be taking the measurements and later who will be drawing the sketches for the gate. As you can tell that there are no materials resources or consumable resources for this activity, then the project manager, after determining the required resources for this activity, will determine or estimate the cost for each of these resources. If the human resource, who is the structural engineer, commands a professional services fee or rate of $250 per hour, this professional services fee or rate could be in the currency of the place where the project is domiciled. That is, it could be 250 rands per hour, or 250 euros per hour, or $250 per hour, or 250 pounds per hour, or even 250 yens per hour. Therefore, if the human resource, who is a structural engineer, commands a professional service fee of 250 per hour and is expected to spend 1 full day on this activity, 1 full day being 8 hours, this is taken from an 8-hour workday, then the cost of this resource for this activity is 8 hours multiplied by professional services rate of 250 per hour, which yields an amount of 2,000 as a human resource cost for the activity measure gate site. Also, because Steelworks Manufacturing already has the tape measure in its inventory of capital resources or project equipment, this is costed through the internal cost center pricing, or simply by its depreciation or wear and tear value. And say the usage of the tape measure will cost an amount of 20, whatever the currency. The usage of the tape measure will cost an amount of, say, 20 rands, or 20 pounds, or $20, or 20 euros for the day's usage of the activity measure gate site. Please note that in order to arrive at the true cost or the true price of a project, nothing is free. No resource is utilized for free. all resources, whether they are sourced from external suppliers or they are sourced from within the performing organization, they need to be costed commensurably to their usage in the project. So the tape measure is also costed for its usage in the project, even though it belongs to steelworks manufacturing. Even the project manager's time spent in the project is costed and included in the final project budget. Then lastly, for the activity measure gate side is the determination of the transport to and from the customer site. In this case, say the structural engineer will use her car and then claim back from steelworks. The steelworks traveling policy rate is 10 per kilometer, that is 10 rands per kilometer or $10 per kilometer or 10 euros per kilometer or 10 pounds per kilometer. And if the customer site is 25 kilometers from steelworks, then the cost for traveling to and back from the customer site is 10 per kilometer multiplied by 25 kilometers multiplied by 2. It is multiplied by 2 because the structural engineer will travel a distance of 25 kilometers twice, which is to and from the customer site. As a result, the transport or traveling cost for this activity is an amount of 500 rands or $500, etc. Whereas with the next activity, the activity sketch gate drawings, the required resources are the design sheet or drafting film, which is a consumable resource. Also required is the design stencil and the design pens, which are the tools or the capital resources or the equipments. And also required is the human resource in form of the structural engineer. Say 7 design sheets of 10-inch size are required, and the supplier has quoted a price of 100 for each drafting film. Then 7 drafting films will cost 700 in total for the activity sketch gate drawings. Also, because steelworks manufacturing already has the stencil and the pens in its inventory of capital resources or project equipment, as it was the case with the tape measure in the activity of measure gate site, the stencil and the pens are costed through the internal cost center pricing or simply by their depreciation or wear and tear value. And say the cost or these cost 30 and 76 respectively for the usage in the activity sketch gate drawings. As already established in the activity measure gate site, the human resource, who is the structural engineer, has a professional service fee rate of 250 per hour and is expected to spend 2 full days on this activity, 2 full days being 16 hours, taken from 8-hour workday. Then the cost of this resource for this activity is 16 hours multiplied by 250, which is the professional service rate, and this yields an amount of 4,000 human resource cost for the activity measure gate site. Similar process or approach is applicable to the rest of the project activities. Once all the project activities have been costed, or rather once the costs for all the project activities have been determined or estimated, they can now be allocated or grouped into cost categories. And these cost categories are then further grouped or allocated into their respective project phases or project milestones. There are 3 generic cost groupings that a project manager can use, and they are direct materials, direct labor, and overheads. That is, within each project phase or project milestone, the direct materials are listed and grouped together and then totaled into direct material costs. The same is done for direct labor and for overheads. Direct material costs refers to the cost of the project consumables or material resources to be used in performing the project activities, which is the money used to purchase the project consumables or materials from suppliers. Direct labor or direct labor cost refers to the cost of the human resources to be used in the performance of the project activities. Direct labor refers to the salaries or wages that is to be paid to workers directly involved in the manufacture of a specific product or in the performance of a specific service in the project. Overheads, on the other hand, refers to any other costs other than direct material costs and other than direct labor costs in the project. They can also be viewed as indirect costs that are incurred by a project in the undertaking of its activities. Project managers' remunerations is one example of an overhead cost in a project. The utilization of the performing organization's capital resources in a project can also be allocated or specified under the project overheads. Therefore, the generic project cost groupings are usually the direct material costs, direct labor costs, and overhead costs. However, any other appropriate or relevant grouping that is suitable for the type of a project that you are managing can be utilized. Note that these groupings or the manner in which the costs are grouped or categorized is not prescribed. A project manager can elect to demonstrate the allocation of costs to project activities using whichever format they deem to be appropriate, as long as all the project activities costs are allocated. A project manager can choose to allocate the project costs at project activity level and then simply add them up into the total project budget. However, it is prudent, especially in large and complex projects, to demonstrate project costing per phase or per milestone for monitoring and controlling purposes, and also for the purpose of their presentation to the project owner or to the project sponsor or to the project steering committee or to the project governance forum or even to any other relevant project stakeholder. For our case example project of building a custom steel sliding gate, we can then demonstrate the cost allocation. First, for the design phase or for the design milestone as displayed. First, we state the name of the project, which is custom 2 meter by 3 meter manual sliding steel gate project. This is followed by the name of the phase or the name of the milestone, which is the design gate or gate design phase or milestone. We can also state the details of the phase by listing the constituent activities. This, however, may be cumbersome for large and complex projects, where a detailed phase description will suffice. However, in our case example, we are able to specify all the phase or milestone activities. And for the gate design phases, these are measure site, sketch drawings, approve sketches, and determine or compile the bill of quantities. Then we can proceed with the allocation of cost items or activity resources cost into direct materials, direct labor, and overhead cost groupings or categories. We start with the direct material costs. In the case of this phase or milestone, the design gate phase, there is only one type of direct material that is used or consumed when executing or performing the activities of this phase. And that consumable is the design sheet or the drafting film. It is a 10-inch size and 7 sheets are required, with a single sheet costing 100, and thus the cost of the 7 sheets is 700. Then we proceed to the direct labor costs. As already discussed and as demonstrated, the human resource requirement for this milestone is just one structural engineer whose cost for the activities of this phase is a rate of 250 per hour. And the engineer is expected to perform the activities of this phase over a period of 3 days, with each working day being 8 hours, implying that the total number of hours to be utilized by the structural engineer is 24 hours. Then at a rate of 250 per hour, the total project cost for this resource in this phase is 6,000. That is, we multiply 24 hours by the rate of 250 per hour. Then the next group are the overhead costs for the design gate milestone activities. These are as already discussed and as listed. Traveling is costed at 500, tape measure is costed at 20, design stencil is costed at 30, and design pens are costed at 76, and the project manager's fee is 200 for this phase, thus arriving at a figure of 826 as a total overhead cost for the design gate milestone. Then lastly, we calculate the design gate phase total cost by adding the 3 subtotal costs for the direct materials, direct labor, and overheads. We arrive at a total of 7,526, which is the sum of 700 for the direct materials, 6,000 for the direct labor, and 856 for overheads. We do likewise for the build gate frame or the build gate structure milestone. The activities of this phase are cut steel tubes as per the gate design drawings or sketches, and then weld the steel tubes together to complete the gate frame. Then, as it was the case with the gate design phase, we can proceed with the allocation of cost items or activity resources cost into direct materials, direct labor, and overhead cost groupings or categories. The direct material costs in the case of this phase or milestone, the build gate structure phase. There are several direct material types that are used or consumed in the activities of this phase. These consumables are as stated, which are mainly different types of steel tubes, and also cutting discs and welding rods. To be specific, there are 4 types of steel tubes that are required for the activities of this milestone. 2 of them are square steel tubes, and the other 2 are rectangular steel tubes. Therefore, the cost allocation for this phase or milestone is as stated and as indicated. A cost of 2,000 is for 8 4-inch square steel tubes of 6 meter length, where a single square tube costs 250, and therefore 8 tubes will cost 2,000. Then a cost of 1,280 is for 4 6-inch square steel tubes of 4 meter length, where 1 square tube costs 320, and therefore 4 tubes will cost 1,280. Then a cost of 1,800 is for 10 2-inch by 4-inch rectangular steel tubes of 6 meter length, where a single rectangular tube costs 180, and therefore 10 tubes will cost 1,800. Then a cost of 2,030 is for 7 4-inch by 6-inch rectangular steel tubes of 4 meter length, where a single rectangular tube costs 290, and therefore 7 tubes will cost 2,030. Then a cost of 600 is for 5 230 millimeter cutting discs, where 1 cutting disc costs 120, and therefore 5 discs will cost 600. Then a cost of 1,500 is for 20 2.5 millimeter welding rods of a 5 kilogram pack, where a single pack of rods costs 76, and therefore 20 packs will cost 1,500. And the total cost of all the direct material activities of the build gate frame phase is 9,210. Then we proceed to the direct labor cost as detailed or as stated, or they are as detailed or they are as stated. A cost of 2,000 is for a single cutting specialist for a full day's work of 8 hours at a rate of 250 per hour. Then a cost of 2,400 is for 2 cutting assistants, also for a full day's work of 8 hours at a rate of 150 per hour for each assistant. Then a cost of 4,400 is for a single welding specialist for a 2 full days work of 8 hours times 2, which is 16 hours, at a rate of 276 per hour. Then a cost of 4,800 is for 2 welding assistants, also for a 2 full days work of 16 hours, at a rate of 150 per hour for each assistant. And the total cost for all the direct labor activities of the build gate frame phase or the build gate structure milestone is 13,600. Then the next group are the overhead cost for this build gate structure milestone activities. A cost of 76 is for the cutting workbench usage. As already stated, everything and every resource and every usage in projects should be costed so as to arrive at the true cost of the project. Then a cost of 26 is for the clamp usage. A cost of 120 is for the cutting grinder usage. Then a cost of 26 is for the measuring instruments usage. A cost of 76 is for the welding workbench usage. A cost of 26 is for the clamp usage. A cost of 176 is for the welding machine usage. Then the project manager's fee is 200. And the total cost for all the overheads of the build gate frame phase is 720. Then lastly, we calculate the build gate frame phase total cost by adding the 3 subtotal costs for direct materials, direct labor and overheads, and we arrive at a total cost of 23,530. A similar regime, logic or pattern is followed for the rest of the phases, as demonstrated for the gate finishes milestone, where direct materials are costed at 3,760, direct labor is costed at 960, and overheads are costed at 426, and the total cost for the milestone is 13,146. And for the gate installation phase, the direct materials are costed at 1,930. Direct labor is costed at 9,100. And overheads are costed at 4,239. And the total cost for the milestone is 15,269. Then once the costs have been allocated and totaled for all the project phases or milestones, the next step is simply to aggregate these subtotals to project total cost. The total cost of individual project milestones are in essence subtotals, and these subtotals should then be aggregated into the project total costs. As you can see in our case example project, that the subtotal cost of the design, build, finish, and install phases or milestones are then aggregated to a project total of 59,469. This figure is the absolute estimate of what it will cost to undertake this project. However, as the old adage would have it that hindsight is the only perfect science, and that it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, project management practice does then try to offset any unforeseen future threat to the estimated project total cost by permitting some allowances to be determined based on certain factors and then added to the estimated project total cost so as to arrive at a project budget or a project price that can be baselined. These permissible allowances are only granted for contingency purposes or for provision purposes. As a result, they are also referred to as contingency reserves. There are various ways that can be used to determine these allowances. This varies from industry to industry, from sector to sector, from organization to organization, but they are usually calculated as a percentage of the project total cost. For our case example project, the steelworks manufacturing project allowance rate is 10% of the project total cost. As demonstrated, 10% of 59,469 is 5,947. Therefore, the contingency reserve for our case example is 5,947. You'd recall that earlier we said that in cases where a project is undertaken for profit, the profit margin is determined from the project aggregate and the project reserves consolidation, or is slotted into the process after the project aggregate and the project reserves, so as to then arrive at the final project budget. This particular project fits this category. It is undertaken for profit, and the steelworks manufacturing project profit rate is 10% of the total project cost plus contingency reserves. As demonstrated, project total cost and the contingency reserves add up to 65,415, and therefore 10% of 65,416 is 6,542. Therefore, the profit margin for our case example is 6,542. Then the project budget is arrived at by consolidating the project total cost and the contingency reserve and the profit margin. As demonstrated, the project budget or the project price for our case example project is 71,958, which is the sum total of 59,469 project total cost and 5,947 contingency allowance and 6,542 profit margin. When the project manager has satisfied themselves that the project budget has been determined or estimated as best as it could be and on the basis of what is known and valid, then the project manager can present it to the project owner or to the project sponsor or to the project governance forum, which is the project steering committee, for scrutiny and ratification. These project stakeholders will expect the project manager to provide an impeccable justification for how they arrived at the final project budget before it can be approved or authorized as project budget baseline. Once the project budget has been approved or authorized as the project budget baseline, it then commits the project resources expenditure and it authorizes the project manager to implement and manage the expenditure aspect of the project. In general sense, or in general approach, what we've covered in this video is the process of compiling a project budget or a project cost management plan. We have covered a general approach to project budgeting, a general approach to project cost management planning. Project budgeting and project cost management planning is one of the 9 processes of project management planning, and a project budget is one of the 9 subsidiaries of the project management plan, where the other 8 subsidiaries are: 1, the stakeholder management plan or the stakeholder register; 2, the scope statement and the work breakdown structure; 3, the project time management plan, which usually consists of the project schedule and the project network diagram; 4, the project resources management plan; 5, the project procurement management plan; 6, the project risks management plan; 7, the project communication management plan; and 8, the project quality management plan. We do have videos on this Real Institute channel that cover these project management subsidiary plans, and the said videos can be accessed and viewed from this Real Institute channel.